And we'll start here with this sentence or two. It's a reference to Raiders of the Lost Ark, starring Harrison Ford. Intersectionality weaponized for political gain. Very dangerous. You go first. So if you've been on Twitter or any of the social media networks, or if you talk politics in 2019, actually I was looking at Edward Snowden. He was saying that he hasn't spoken much on Twitter or social media in 2019 because, well, people are kind of having a bit of a culture war now, aren't they? So intersectionality is a big proponent of that, a component, I should say. Proponent, sure, because intersectionality is, in a sense, it is a form of identity politics, which I also refer to as the modern religion of social justice, and some say cultural Marxism, and some say social Marxism. But intersectionality, intersectional feminism, which would be the fourth wave of the feminist movement. You have the first wave, the second wave, the third wave, and the fourth wave, which is the intersectionality, and that includes, of course, the LGBTQ movement as well. But when you're weaponizing otherism, when you're weaponizing putting people into groups instead of viewing them as individuals, well, you might have a bad time. In this pursuit, this altruistic pursuit of togetherness, of equality and equity, well, there's a few different ways of going about that. You can adjust your economy, you can look at all the social issues and ask questions and survey people, or you can just look at people and go, well, you're this minority, so if you're not the majority, you're a minority. Majority being the oppressor, minority being the oppressed, in any given setting. Doesn't matter if it's about immutable characteristics or religion, or your job, your occupation, or your hobbies, how you associate. Hell, even the people you talk to, people come after you, intersectionalists, and look at you more as the group you're a part of as opposed to the individual. Now, I learned this, of course, in 2016, when in Massachusetts we had a pretty blue state. Now, I had a couple friends that immediately brought race and sex into the conversation when we were discussing how we voted. So I said, well, I was just like their comrade, Kyle Kulinski, and I said, I'm going to go ahead and vote for Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate, and because I can't really stomach voting for Hillary Clinton. And I said, well, just like Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk, check him out on YouTube, I said, if I lived in a swing state, I would vote for the Democrat, because at the time I did not want President Trump, the then nominee, the Republican nominee Trump. I did not want him to win. In fact, I was quite anti-Trump at that time. I've kind of changed my tune over the past 3 years. Hillary Clinton is not the only person that's allowed to evolve, after all. So I said I'll vote for the Green Party candidate. That goes more with my personal principles, my personal feelings about politics, about policy. And hey, it's a woman as well. I'll be voting for a female candidate for the first time, by the way, since I was a 2 times Obama voter. And they said, you privileged white male, I honestly can't explain why they went to that. I mean, they were a bit traumatized. Of course, this is just after Trump won on November 8th. The aftermath on November 9th, 2016, Trump had won. And immediately I had a couple friends say, you're privileged, you're white, you're male. And I said, this is why Trump won. Because you keep framing everything as these immutable characteristics. I can't do anything about this. I can't feel guilty about this. If I felt guilty about who I am, who I was born as, well, I mean, it's a struggle that people do. People do have guilt complexes, and they can feel like they're, imposter syndrome. There's all these different ways that people can feel like they don't belong. But me, I said, I'm just going with my instinct here. And if I would have voted for Hillary Clinton, but because the Democrat Party had created such a dynamic that if you didn't vote for Hillary, you were voting for Trump. If you didn't go with the Democrats, you were any other option, Trump. Now, I'm not sure if that was, electorally true. If there were a couple states that were pretty close, where Jill Stein or Gary Johnson or any of the other, independent candidates, Vermin Supreme, they were there. But, and frankly, you're supposed to earn our vote. You're supposed to earn our vote. You're not supposed to be just given our vote without consideration. Oh, you're on the red team, so I'm going to vote for you. That's not how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to actually earn the vote and not reward people, presidential candidates, congressional candidates, for doing a bad job. If they did a bad job persuading you or explaining themselves, or if they have positions you don't believe in or agree with, well, how can you stomach voting for them? This is why people don't vote at all. The energy just isn't there. They're like, I can't get behind this. Now, there were plenty of people that, wanted to vote Clinton or Trump that stayed home. So how much, when you're saying like, because, the Green Party and the Libertarian Party exist, it takes away votes from the other parties. I say, well, how many people stayed home? Leave me a comment below with how many people stayed home, eligible voters, in the 2016 U.S. presidential election, because it's a large number. It's probably over half the people that were eligible didn't vote. So how much at fault, if you're going to be traumatized and placing blame wherever you'd like to, how much do they factor in? But you see them around, the disciples of the modern religion of social justice, and they're, altruistic racists, altruistic otherists, because, despite their best intentions, wherever those may lead, well, they separate people by group, just like Richard Nixon, just like the Southern strategy back in the 1960s. And they'll say, well, we're looking out for the little guy. We're looking out for minorities. We're looking out for the disadvantaged. And that's all very, virtuous. I support the goal there. But the method, the system that they're using to get there, identity politics, it's not really very humanistic to me. I think that it's collectivism. It's not individuality. It's not the liberty, the individual liberty and agency that we, our country, the United States, was founded upon. The states are separate. They have their own sovereignty. They have their own laws. And they all fall under that big umbrella that is the federal government. But in the end, they're all their own thing. I don't wish to be defined by the color of my skin or my ethnicity, my national origin. I was born here in the United States, but, going back in terms of where people of my culture came from originally, where they, immigrated from or migrated from, I don't want to be defined by those people. I have nothing to do with those people except for we have the same amount of, I believe is it melanin? It's like the stuff that makes your skin the pigment color that it is. And, I'm male. There was pretty much two major options there for Mother Nature, and I became male. So, I know plenty of women that share my disposition about things, that share my positions. I could have very easily been a woman, and I could have had the same positions. I could have had the same politics, the same philosophy. There's 7 billion philosophies out there, but I could have had any one of those, but I happen to have this one. And of course, so I'm biased. I have in-group preference. I have all these reasons why, my view is skewed, of course. And someone could say, well, you have money, however much they think I have. Or they could say, you have this, you're in this group. You have these immutable characteristics. You're in this part of the world. You're in this part of the country. They could say you have privilege. And I say, look, if you want to break it down by privilege and by group, hey, be my guest. I'm no judge. I am no profit of any modern religion. These are for the devoutly secular to find individual their individual truth. No, I was going to say it's how they find their universal truth, not their individual truth, not their subjective inner world, but their outer world truth. When you don't have God, you have to replace him. Or if you don't have Allah, you have to replace him with something, even if you're secular. And what they do is they replace them with modern religion, and that's social justice, how to organize society and what is most important, what are the biggest goals. And I think that, in the search for real world moralism and making sure everyone's okay, it's just like Benjamin Franklin said about, sacrificing security. It doesn't jive for everybody. And so it is a philosophy, it's an ideology, and reality and ideology, they run on separate interweaving tracks. My view of the world isn't your view of the world. Your view of the world isn't my view of the world. And so people are willing to trade a lot of their freedom for more safety, more security. So they're willing to go down this rabbit hole of the modern religion that is censorship to make sure that any ideas that conflict with their ideology of social justice, they don't get the airtime that they normally would have. They artificially limit which conversations are being had. And of course, they limit speech, they limit the words, they try to condition everybody and get everybody on the same page. But at the end of the day, you have to be compliant to this very specific ideology. Now, I consider myself a bit agnostic on social justice as a modern religion, but I do consider myself to be, at the least, a second wave feminist that has, some appreciation for a few things in the third and fourth wave. But the third wave feminism, to me, was the start of, things were generally equal. And then, when you're on a crusade, it's hard to know when the war is over. And in many ways, the war is never over. The struggle always continues somehow, some way, with some person that hasn't been persuaded, that hasn't been brought in on the progress that the rest of us have enjoyed. But with third and fourth wave feminism, there are elements we need to respect. The LGBTQAI plus community, they, have made major strides in the United States. Gay marriage became legal, and there's been some strides in acceptance. But of course, villainizing, demonizing, creating an oppressor to, redirect our hate, because there's nothing people love to do more than hate, and it's about directing it correctly. Well, they direct it towards the oppressor, and the oppressor is, however, they're arbitrarily assigned by the prophets of the modern religion of social justice. So intersectionality weaponized for political gain, very dangerous. You go first. Why is it dangerous? Well, it is generating racism, it is generating otherism, generating sexism, pitting two different sides against each other, putting them against one another. And we've seen the intersectional movement break down a little bit, because you have different groups of feminists now that are ideologically fighting it out. That was the tell for me. That was the proof where I said, we keep on going down that road, that beautiful yellow brick road to somewhere that these good intentions take us. And are you bringing more love into the world, or are you bringing more division? Are you pulling people apart, or are you bringing them together? And then you have to look at this in a universal context. If you're looking for universal truth and moral virtue, it can't just apply to places that are... You can't just go into a majority black country and say, well, where are all the white and Asian people? Why are you being so oppressive? They have to be in equal numbers, and they have to have an equal opportunity, and so on and so forth, which is something we should have. We should have equal opportunity for all people, regardless of their race, creed, any of these things, sex, gender, religion. We should, but it's not a game. Life isn't a game to make everything leveled off and equal. We should offer equal opportunity. But it's really hard, trying to get equal outcomes is really, really hard in a meritocratic system. Either you get rid of meritocracy and then maybe you could have more equal outcomes. But intersectionality is well intended. There are good parts of it. But again, when it gets weaponized, people use it. They run around. I saw a guy on Twitter the other day who's like, well, you know what racists don't like? Racists don't like being called racist. And then another person of color came in. And that was a white guy saying that. So, that's the oppressor, right? According to the modern religion. Person of color comes in, or, a darker hue. Okay, not a white color, but a darker color. They come in and they're like, do you like being called a racist? Like, who likes being called a racist? I don't care. I don't mind being called a racist. I've been called all sorts of things in my time on social media and so forth. Call me racist if you want. Call me a sexist, misogynist pig. Call me dumb. Call me stupid. Say I'm wrong. It's just, it has to flow off of you. If it doesn't flow off of you when people say things about you that aren't true, if you just take everything to heart, every insult, every commentary that's half-baked, as Scott Adams says, a half-pinion about you, they don't really know what you're doing. They're just trying to mind read. They're trying to project. They're trying to straw man. If you take all those so seriously, you're not going to have much fun online, because this is a constant cycle, constant struggle. Name calling. It's just like the old schoolyard. I don't like to bring race into the discussion unless it is, warranted. If it's contextual. I don't like to bring it up in terms of talking about the socioeconomic picture. I mean, there are certain races that are disproportionately in the lower income brackets, and there are others that are in the higher income brackets. So there is this class, this Marxist look, saying classes are divided. You have the rich, you have the poor. So identity politics, people will say, like, all politics are identity politics. All politics are identity politics. And I say, well, in some respect, like, you have people that are patriotic, so you appeal to their American group sensibility, their group mentality as a nation. If you're a nationalistic president, you want to say, France first, Canada first, America first. Yeah, you want to appeal to the national identity of your voters. You want to look at them by the country they, come from, and they're proud to be, American, proud to be French or Canadian, or French-Canadian even. But in terms of, I think it's doing more harm. I don't want to call it immoral per se, but I think it's doing more harm than good at this point to keep bringing up race, to keep bringing up gender and sex. Bring it up. But to point to a situation and say, oh, well, you did this bad thing, you did this negative thing, or this positive thing. You did it because of an immutable characteristic. In the long run, does that help or does that hurt? Should we be defined by our immutable characteristics? I don't know. I don't think so, but you can leave me a comment below with your thoughts and observations on that. A lot of beeps outside today. It's all about framing in the end. I see this other tweet here saying, it's not a Muslim ban, it's not a Muslim ban, it's not a Muslim ban, it's not a Muslim ban. Because of the 7 countries that the Trump administration had banned from travel to the United States. I guess they were predominantly Muslim, but of course, using identity politics, this is why I kind of, I used to pitch to some degree identity politics. But I very quickly fell off when I learned that any situation can be framed as identity. Like these countries don't have just Muslim people, and lots of Muslim countries weren't banned, and yet they're framing it as a Muslim ban. It's a political ploy. It's a post-truth ploy. You just frame it up, say it's Muslim ban. That isn't explicitly what it is. But again, it's like saying that any bill that benefits the rich is racist because certain races are associated more with the lower income groups. No. That's a separation. That's a different level altogether from what you're saying. And that really puts people in a box, too. That removes their individuality. Like, look at all the people in that group, for example, that you're alluding to or referring to as being, marginalized or disadvantaged. What about the people that are in that group that are in the upper group? How do they feel? How do the people below feel that, for example, black people are associated with lower income? Even if it's true, is it something that motivates people? Or is it something that, disrespects them, dishonors them? Does it feel good to be associated with a negative thing? And, it could be something to look at in order to improve the situation. You could look at it and go, well, we could do more, we could do better. This is a marker, this is an indicator where resources are needed. But again, framing everything as race, as gender, as our group, the groups we're a part of, it can be, I think there are diminishing returns. And I think we're starting to see them because, people don't even want to talk online that much anymore in 2019. 2019 has been the year of hoaxes and all kinds of nonsense. People at each other's throats. You have groups saying that they're, Antifa, anti-fascist. And then Scott Adams came up with one called Antira, anti-racist, because basically Antifa was saying that any group that that goes against them is by definition fascist because they're anti-fascist. Like they're operating on like the most basic linguistic plane. They're saying like just because we put a label on it, it means the reality shifts based on the label. Everything's a construct. You can just label. It's postmodernism. You can label whatever you want. Change the label. Change the game entirely. And I say, no. Some things in this world are concrete. You can't just change the word and change the meaning entirely. Especially when it's talking about people. People are ever changing. People are very unique.